Executives laughed at the janitor, but he revealed perfect Dutch and left everyone amazed. David pushed his mop across the gleaming floor, each stroke a reminder of the life he'd envisioned before everything shattered. The sleek, bustling skyscraper around him pulsed with urgency, yet he remained an unseen participant, a ghost lingering in the shadows of polished glass and expert conversations. With each passing day, he folded himself into the fabric of the corporate world, replacing pens and emptying trash cans, while inside a storm brewed, grief and loneliness wrapped tightly around his heart. The executives were gathering for a pivotal meeting, tension crackling in the air. Voices floated in and out as laughter erupted from the boardroom, mocking the underestimation of those like him. What use is a janitor in a business deal? They scoffed. David clenched the mop handle tighter, his breath hitching in his throat. Every denial hollowed him out deeper, clawing at the edges of his already fragile self-worth. The ghosts of his wife's laughter echoed in his mind, reminding him of her faith and the beauty of their dreams, a comfort long since extinguished. As conversations picked up speed, he found himself longing to grasp hold of that flicker of hope once more. A brutal mix of shame and anger washed over him. If only they knew, if only they could see beyond the uniform, the faded edges of his life. His fingers trembled, glistening with the residue of cleaning supplies, as he recalled the warmth of his wife teaching him Dutch, her words flowing through him like the sweetest lullaby. A gift that felt more like a curse in this moment. To reveal he could bridge this gap would mean exposing his vulnerability, the vulnerability of a man crushed by the weight of responsibility, bound by the expectations pressed upon him. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The meeting's urgency grew palpable, falling apart as communication barriers finally brought chaos to an executive's calculated small talk. David's heart raced, and his palms felt clammy against the mop. Should he step forward? The gravity of that question anchored him, compressing the air in his lungs. He was terrified not of speaking Dutch, but of what lay beyond that moment. Would they finally see him? Or would it reveal his inadequacies, dragging him back into the shadows? Silence filled the room as the executives floundered. Their faces wore masks of desperation, and it ignited something within him, a flickering flame that urged him on. They were drowning in their own incompetence and the thought of being remembered only as the janitor tore him apart. And yet, beneath the anguish bubbled a fierce, defiant pride that begged to rise. The internal battle raged on, a wild tension suffocating his resolve. Taking a step forward, his throat dry, David felt the eyes of 1,000 unseen judgments piercing through him. Could he face the scorn? The moments of hesitation bled into one another, hanging thick in the air, demanding he either unveil his hidden skill or remain forever scorned. Would they take note of this vulnerable life, or would everything keep spiraling into darkness? David stood fixed. He could either languish in his pain or embrace this moment, forever shifting the course of who he was meant to become. In that moment of decision, doubt and determination intermingled in David's chest like smoke coiling around a flame. He envisioned his wife's eyes, the warmth, the laughter, the gentle encouragement, and drew from that well of love the courage he needed. Stepping fully into the light, he allowed himself to be vulnerable. His voice wavered at first but surged forth as he spoke in flawless Dutch. Perhaps I can help with this? The executives froze, disbelief painted across their faces. Shock carved through the air, but as David continued, his fluency transformed their astonishment into uneasy intrigue. Words flowed easily, filling the void of their stilted conversations. In that fleeting moment, the janitor had become an unanticipated ally, wielding language like a skillful negotiator. The room buzzed with tension, but the laughter that once ridiculed now morphed into hushed respect. His heart raced. With each Dutch phrase, he felt weight lifting, replacing the sorrow with clarity, as if the language had been a dormant seed within him just waiting to bloom. He discerned faces shifting, expressions metamorphosing as they slowly recognized the power encapsulated in someone they deemed an inconsequential part of their world. Yet beneath the surface satisfaction, an unsettling question gnawed at him: was this moment enough to redefine who he was? Or would the visibility recede, leaving him once again cloaked in shadows, slipping back to the sidelines? He fought against this creeping dread, reminding himself that vulnerability was a strength, not a weakness. After his unexpected interjection, a stifled commotion ensued. One executive, a woman with sharp features and a crest of authority visible in the flicker of her stern gaze, gestured toward him. "Who are you?" she demanded, a hint of awe breaking through her initial skepticism. Fear mingled with exhilaration as David grappled with his identity exposed for the first time. How would he answer? "I am just David," he finally replied, reclaiming the janitor's mantle but infusing it with newfound pride. "But I'm also someone who loves languages. I believe they can connect us beyond barriers." A collective shift in the room began to crystallize, as curiosity wrapped around suspicion, peeling back layers of dismissiveness. He caught glimpses of admiration amid doubt. Even the echo of his wife's laughter resonated, almost shattering his emotional walls. How long had he buried this dynamic part of himself, thinking it irrelevant in the stark corporate landscape that looked through him rather than at him? The atmosphere pulsed with a growing intensity. A realization dawned on him: he had a power that resided not only in his linguistic integrity but in the unyielding hope that lay intertwined with his grief. Emboldened, he sensed a ripple forming, connecting roles and perhaps lives that had been previously isolated. As discussions transitioned, David stood tall among the executives, ready to navigate through their challenges, his insights guiding them to think beyond mere transactions. This was the crucible. No longer would he reject the janitor label, nor would he relinquish his desire to grow, to inspire. He could create a legacy that stretched beyond a mop and bucket, but as he absorbed the magnitude of this transformation, a tide of decisions loomed ahead. The moment felt monumental, yet trepidation still lingered. What came next? Did he dare to awaken aspirations beyond the boundaries drawn by others? What would this new path entail, and how far might he venture from this corporate sanctuary into the unknown of his own potential? With a flicker of anticipation, he prepared himself for the challenges ahead, knowing he had already crossed a threshold that would never let him return to the cloistered shadows of his past. The moment of truth awaited him, and with it, the fear of failure. Would he turn back or forge ahead, undaunted by potential criticism? Right then, as the meeting began to find its feet, an unexpected call shattered the dynamic, an email alert flashing across his phone. A name he never expected to see again, an opportunity he feared might be too far out of reach, an old friend reaching out from across the country. What did they want? Could this connection draw him deeper into a world he was only starting to recognize as his own? David's heart raced as he stared at the email notification on his phone. The familiar name sent ripples of unease through him. Greg. They had been best friends in college, navigating the chaotic halls of academia together, dreaming of futures that shimmered with promise. But time had a way of unraveling dreams. Shadows of separation crept in after David's life took a different path, one that led him to the corporate fringes where he now wielded a mop instead of a briefcase. As he contemplated the message, the executive meeting flowed around him, dialogue sparking from person to person. David could feel the weight of their eyes occasionally flicking towards him, still processing his unexpected entrance into their world. He was still grappling with the dissonance of his past and present that he hesitated for barely a moment. Curiosity about the email was igniting his ambition anew. With a quick flick of his finger, he opened the message, the subject line reading, "Exciting opportunity." Greg's words cascaded through the screen, offering an invitation to join a burgeoning startup back in their college town. The startup promised to revolutionize effective communication solutions across industries, everything that resonated with David's newly sharpened skills. Could this be the beginning of his resurrection? With every word he read, exhilaration wrestled with fear. What if he'd fail? What if this was just another mirage in the desert of missed opportunities? But beneath that fear lay something else, a longing to reclaim that version of himself, that vibrant ideal he had once nurtured. No longer would he be content to watch from the periphery, he craved involvement, participation, and ambition. David? The sharp-featured executive once again pierced through the fog of his thoughts. Are you with us? He snapped his attention back, shaking off the reverberation of old insecurities. Yes, I was just reflecting on our discussion, he responded, his voice regaining its previously found confidence. Pleasantly surprised, the room hung on his words, and he felt a renewed surge of purpose course through him. This wasn't merely about tagging along anymore, he could finally share his envisioned role in this larger narrative. Communication is more than just words. It's about connection, understanding others in a way that defies barriers. And in our global landscape, it's paramount. He could see their expressions shifting once more, a subtle approval spread among the executives. Maybe he could cultivate this newfound respect into something larger. Perhaps the skepticism would fade, replaced by recognition of the value he could bring not just in translations but in forging relationships. Then, amidst the heady atmosphere of impending success, David's mind returned to Greg's email. A throbbing ambition stirred deep within, but it clashed with his reality. He had just started to garner respect here. Would abandoning this budding role in corporate respectability signal weakness? Would he be seen as a dreamer, rather than the pragmatic man now poised to assert influence? As the meeting drew to a close, David resolved to answer Greg's email. This pivotal moment was a call to action, a chance to seize a part of himself he had kept buried. But as he crafted his response, the tension of choices loomed heavy. How would he balance these dual identities? One path seemed certain yet risk-laden, while the other promised the comfort of the familiar but felt instinctively constrictive. Just as the meeting room emptied, David's phone buzzed again. Another email alert, a message from someone deeper within this corporate labyrinth. The name on the screen was even more unexpected, an old college rival who had become a revered figure in the industry. What would they want from him now? David felt a wave of uncertainty wash over him. The timing was all too coincidental. Had he truly evoked enough potential to warrant attention from the likes of them? The door was opening wider, filled with opportunities and ancestral fears, yet it was the push from the friend and rival that might tip the scales toward his ultimate decision. Every choice was being sharpened by this new awakening. What awaited him on the other side of this crossroads, and would he be able to redefine who he was fundamentally? Behind the prospect of a response lay an unexpected convergence of past and present, blending into a picture that seemed almost chaotic yet vibrant. That he took a deep breath. The stakes were higher than ever. He had to decide. Would he step through the emerging doorway, or retreat back to the safety of his janitor's uniform? As uncertainty crowded around him, a single thought emerged. What if the next chapter of his life was just beginning, a narrative of audacious ambition he had yet to write? David's fingers hovered over the keyboard as he weighed his response to Greg and his old rival. An invitation to reclaim his former self danced tantalizingly close, yet the momentum of newfound purpose kept him anchored to the present. This surprising corporate respect. The duality of his choices gnawed at him. Should he embrace the risk of the startup or remain tethered to this precarious throne he had only just begun to occupy? Each option felt like a tug-of-war inside himself, the voice of ambition wrestling with the shadows of self-doubt. With a last glance at the email from Greg, he clicked it closed, refocusing on the latest message from his rival, Bennett, who had been a constant thorn in his side during their college years. The sleek corporate terminology glared at him from the screen, seeming out of place against his jumble of thoughts. David, I've been following your recent engagement at the firm. I believe we could collaborate on an upcoming project. A surge of adrenaline ignited his curiosity. Collaboration? From Bennett? The same man who had once challenged his every word in class, calling his ideas impractical and naive? David's thoughts sprinted back to the fierce debates they had shared, both sharing a fire for communication yet often at odds in their approaches. Bennett's rise to prominence held elements of envy, but dwelling too long on the past would drag him back. Instead, he leaned into the challenge. Could he find any common ground with someone he had always perceived as a rival? Moments passed as he considered his options. Joining Bennett could amplify his current standing within the corporate environment, cultivate relationships wrought from respect rather than mockery, but at what cost? Would he surrender parts of himself to unduly align with someone who had spent years undermining him? Internal conflict sparked again. He was not simply seeking externals to fulfill some delusional standard. He wanted to thrive on his own terms. Breathing deeply, he opened Bennett's email and began to draft a response. "I'm intrigued by the opportunity. Let us discuss how our visions might align." As he typed those words, he felt a surge of clarity wash over him. This could be a strategic pivot, a way to transform rivalry into collaboration, fostering a kind of respect that might ultimately benefit them both. With a click, he sent the email, relief washing out his lingering hesitation. But just as quickly as that relief emerged, the internal echoes of his unresolved feelings about Greg's invitation crashed back in. He quickly opened a new draft window. As he began to type a response to Greg, he envisioned the enthusiastic person he used to be, oscillating between passion and projection. This startup could be an opportunity to build something meaningful, to engage in the innovation he craved. His finger hesitated over the keyboard. "Dear Greg, I would love to discuss this further. I've been exploring my path here," and he paused. But who was he becoming? Was he, the janitor seeking to embody corporate respect, ready to leap back into the uncertainties of startups? Suddenly, he slammed the laptop shut. The air felt thick with indecision. What was he even fighting against? He had a pioneering spirit that had once driven him to aspire for more than what lay before him. Raising both emails in front of him, David mentally recast his narrative strands. The challengers from his past may have become allies, and perhaps this flux of opportunities was a way to craft a new story full of promise, not just for himself but for those who had doubted him. But just as he was contemplating the implications of these intertwined paths, his office phone rang, breaking his reverie. It was his supervisor, calling to inquire about a project proposal he had submitted weeks ago, one that had nothing to do with the executive team. How unprepared he felt, suddenly thrust back into responsibilities he had momentarily overlooked. "Can you come to my office for a moment?" Her voice echoed, bringing with it a surge of apprehension. What now, eh? Reprimand or renewed judgment on his recent contributions? David's heart thudded against his chest as he picked up his notes to head to her office. A single question gripped him: would this confrontation redefine the stakes even further? As the door creaked open, he faced the threshold between his expectations and harsh realities, sensing that the next move would demand more than just courage. It would require an unveiling of his true self. As David crossed the threshold into his supervisor's office, the neatly arranged space seemed to loom larger than life, accentuating his nervous energy. The walls, adorned with achievements and accolades, whispered reminders of the expectations surrounding him. This was not just a meeting, it was a critical juncture that would demand clarity and strength. His supervisor, Elaine, sat behind her polished oak desk, her expression unreadable. In the past, moments like this would have made David shrink internally. Today, however, he felt a surge of determination. He was not the same man who had once grimaced at the prospect of judgment. "David, thank you for coming in," Elaine started, her tone professional yet warm. "I've been reviewing your recent project proposal, and I wanted to discuss it further." He nodded, keenly aware of the weight clinging to her words. This was his moment to showcase his growth, to reveal how he had translated his experiences into viable business insights rather than just complaints about corporate structure. It was not about being the janitor anymore, it was about being David, the innovator, the thinker, the communicator. She continued, "Your ideas on streamlining communication processes within our teams are intriguing, but they might benefit from a clearer outline of implementation. Can you walk me through your proposed steps?" The request ignited a spark within him. He took a steadying breath, recalling the countless hours spent studying operational efficiency and engaging with colleagues. "Absolutely, Elaine," he replied, finding his voice. "I believe that by integrating a real-time feedback system, we can enhance transparency and eliminate the gaps that often lead to miscommunication." As he spoke, clarity surged through him. Each point articulated not only reflected his vision but also acknowledged the invaluable lessons learned from his unlikely journey. He had faced his fears, and instead of shying away from critique, he now invited it, seeing it as an opportunity for growth. Elaine leaned closer, displaying a glimmer of interest that hadn't been there before. "That's interesting, David. But how can you ensure that the change is embraced by the team and doesn't meet resistance?" Her challenge invigorated him. This was not merely a question, it was an invitation to delve deeper into leadership and influence. "I think engagement is key. By involving team members in the initial stages, we could cultivate a sense of ownership over the process. If they see this as a collective evolution rather than a top-down directive, we're more likely to see positive results." He felt the shift, a palpable energy building in the room. Each idea he shared was fortified by lessons he had internalized, not just from his role but from the metaphorical battlefield with Greg and Bennett. He realized their challenges had equipped him with the intuition to navigate corporate politics and interpersonal dynamics. Elaine scribbled notes, nodding appreciatively. "This is quite impressive, David. I can see how your past experiences have informed your approach. Your recent growth hasn't gone unnoticed." Her acknowledgement filled him with an exhilarating mix of humility and pride. A spark of audacity flickered to life. He sought not just approval but a legacy that would resonate beyond surface-level achievements. As the meeting transitioned into logistics and deadlines, David felt an internal shift. This was unmistakably a defining moment, a culmination of all his struggles and triumphs unfolding into a seamless narrative. As they wrapped up, she leaned back, expression contemplative. "Let us schedule a follow-up next week to discuss further implementation strategies. And perhaps you could consider presenting these ideas to the executive team." His heart raced, and with it came the thrill of impending opportunities. Suddenly, the prospect of both Bennett's collaboration and Greg's startup invitation seemed less like opposing forces and more like complementary pathways in his professional landscape. As he exited her office, the gravity of Elaine's words resonated. This was his chance to redefine himself publicly, to declare his evolution from an overlooked past to an assertive future. But as David pondered the possibilities, the shadow of doubt loomed again, twisting in his gut. Was he truly ready to embrace the full spectrum of what this new role demanded? What would collaboration with Bennett truly entail? He stepped out into the hallway, determination swelling within him yet battling against the whispers of insecurity. And just then, his phone buzzed again, a new email alert, this time from Greg, titled, "Next Steps." David's pulse quickened as he opened it, bracing for whatever crossroads lay ahead. What if this was the moment everything changed once more? David stared at the screen, the anticipation rising with each passing second. The email started with a brief recap of their last conversation, an exchange that had ignited a fire in him. But as he read further, the mixed emotions twisted in his gut like a tangled knot. Greg's approach was confident, laden with enthusiasm about the startup, but the implications felt overwhelming. Could he balance his corporate responsibilities with the exhilarating chaos of a startup? He hesitated, fingers hovering over the keys. The allure of a fresh venture was undeniable, yet it came with its own set of risks, potentially pulling him away from the stability he had fought so hard to gain. Doubts whispered in the corners of his mind. What if he faltered? What if this was destined to fail? Hand trembling slightly, he typed out a reply, attempting to quell the uncertainty with an air of coordination. "I'm interested in discussing the next steps further. However, I want to ensure that my commitments to my current role remain intact." His own insistence on grounding pressure echoed to him, an internal affirmation of his priorities that he had sent before he could second-guess himself, shifting his focus back to Elaine's encouraging remarks. For a moment, that spark of original ambition reignited. Breathing deeply, he summoned the essence of the meeting, the possibility he felt coursing through him. As he maneuvered through the office space, David's mind was a maelstrom of strategies: what he could achieve through the realignment of communication systems, how to present them next week to the executive team, and ways to incorporate feedback effectively. It was as if he were weaving a tapestry, threads of experience, insight, and newfound confidence interlaced to create a vision larger than himself. He stepped into his communal workspace, finding solace in the rhythm of familiar conversations around him. Colleagues varied from engrossed in their tasks to engaging in light banter. Among them was Sarah, a bright junior analyst who had been a quiet admirer of his recent contributions. She looked up and smiled, drawing him briefly back from his whirlwind thoughts. "Hey, David. I heard about your meeting with Elaine. Congratulations on the follow-up. Sounds like you're making waves." Her voice held a genuine warmth, encouraging him further. "Thanks, Sarah," he responded, a smile creeping onto his face. "I'm just trying to keep the momentum going." He felt that momentary connection expand his resolve. If he could influence even one person today, it would reaffirm his direction. As the hours went by, David worked meticulously on refining his presentation for the executives. Ideas flowed more freely now, sculpted by the undercurrents of his ambitions. He committed to practicing his pitch, envisioning the room full of decision-makers advising him to proceed with his plans, each nod from them a confirmation of his worth, but halting moments of trepidation intruded often, compelling him to face persistent fears of inadequacy. In quiet moments, he questioned whether presenting to the executives would be merely a prelude to his next challenge. What if they didn't see the potential he saw? Doubt lingered like a shadow. As he packed up at the end of the day, the weight of expectation pressed on him. His phone buzzed once more, a message from Greg, followed by another from Elaine, echoing each thought neatly into a single stream of consciousness. Two pathways stretched wide ahead, the exhilarating uncertainty of a startup and the structured ambition that corporate life offered. In that moment, the world outside faded while he contemplated the crossroad before him. Each choice had repercussions, each path woven into the fabric of who he might become. Then came the electric jolt of decision. Would he prioritize a promising venture with Greg, risking everything he had worked for, or would he delve into untested waters and present his ideas to a critical audience? The challenge ahead stirred new, unsettling resolve. With certainty melding into intrigue, he dialed Greg's number, a decision tumbling forth, yet uncertain of where it would lead. As the phone rang, David took a deep breath. This would be more than a conversation, it was a declaration. What awaited him on the other side of that call would set the stage for the next chapter of his journey. The ringing continued, punctuating the stillness of his office space, each sound amplifying the doubts lurking just beneath the surface. When Greg finally answered, a cheerfulness infused the air. "David. Glad you called." "Hey, Greg," he managed, his voice steady despite the whirlwind within. "I've been thinking about our conversation. I want to explore the startup idea further." A decision forged in uncertainty, but the calm demeanor in Greg's voice acted as a salve. "Fantastic. Let us meet tomorrow," Greg proposed instantly, excitement crackling over the line. "I'll give you a deeper insight into our vision, team dynamics, everything. There's so much potential, David. Your background could skyrocket us." David could hear the enthusiasm radiating through the connection, making the prospects feel even more tangible. Yet beneath that enthusiasm lay an eeriness, the thrill of such a leap also echoed with potential failure. It was an exhilarating risk that could unravel everything he'd known. "Sure. I need some time to think about how to manage my current obligations," David responded, grappling with the tension between ambition and caution. After they exchanged a few more thoughts, he hung up feeling a mixture of hope and anxiety. This new venture promised to stretch the boundaries of what he believed he was capable of, but at what cost? Over the next few hours, David's mind raced as he honed his presentation for the executives. A familiar pulse of determination surged through him as he envisioned standing before them, sharing innovative ideas and demonstrating his expertise. He began to fill in slides with graphs, projections, and bold, eloquent phrases, but insecurities crept back in. What if they dismissed his ideas? What if they didn't recognize their worth? To counter the fears assaulting him, he sat in silence, gathering his thoughts and deciding to confront them head-on. He began listing potential outcomes of the presentation, both positive and negative. The answers weren't easy, and he was surprised by how many doubts came to light. As he bravely dissected each fear, turning them over like stones in a river, clarity emerged. The only way forward was through vulnerability, embracing not just his expertise but also his limitations. The next morning, David dressed in a crisp suit, the fabric feeling like armor against his apprehensions. He joined his colleagues in the conference room, an air of expectation enveloping the space. The executives gathered, murmuring among themselves as he entered, all sharp suits and confident smiles. Their eyes were focused, eager for what he would reveal, each greeting resonated with a formality that added weight to the room. As David stood at the front, he felt exposed, yet a sudden surge of adrenaline propelled him forward. He initiated his presentation, a symphony of facts and visions laced with personal anecdotes aiming to resonate. Their facial expressions fluctuated between skepticism and curiosity. He noted a few eye rolls and muffled whispers among the ranks, a reflection of the corporate culture he was desperate to break through. Nonetheless, he pressed on, channeling energy into every word, determined to shift their perception. With each slide, he illustrated his vision, the synergy he could create between his current obligations and the startup endeavor. Midway through, he glanced at the executives. Was it sheer resolve or unease he detected? Realizing that they were not just hearing him, but judging every syllable, an unsettling ripple coursed through him. They seemed trapped in a mindset too distant from entrepreneurial risk. Then, unexpected laughter erupted from one corner of the room, executives snickering at the thought of intertwining his current role with a startup. The laughter stung, pulling at the very core of his confidence. They saw a janitor's enthusiasm when he wanted them to see a leader. "You know, I believe we can't ignore the other side of the coin," he interjected, his voice sharper than intended. "Sometimes, it's the unassuming who can drive the most change, if given the chance." With that statement, he suddenly realized something profound. His value wasn't defined by their perception, but by his own belief in what he could accomplish. The room fell into silence, all eyes riveted on him as he gathered his thoughts. Would they accept that challenge? Would they recognize his potential? But before he could continue, his phone buzzed ominously in his pocket. A message from Greg glimmered on the screen, an invitation to revisit their earlier discussions, to reconsider everything he was compromising. That it was time for David to define what truly mattered, both for his professional growth and his self-identity. What came next held the potential to shift his focus in unexpected directions, propelling him toward the unknown. Would he stand firm against corporate constraints, or embrace the alluring risks the startup world offered? Each decision now felt like an uncertain leap deeper into either ambition or stability. As he gazed at the expectant faces surrounding him, the anticipation thickening, David knew the true battle had only just begun. David's heart raced as he absorbed the silence that followed his interruption. The executives, once caught up in their dismissive laughter, now wore expressions of surprise, perhaps even intrigue. He had shifted the narrative, however slightly, but it wasn't enough. Deep down, he wrestled with the flurry of reactions. Would they truly acknowledge his insight, or was he merely grasping at straws? "Let us reassess," he proposed, allowing the tension in the room to linger. "This isn't just about roles, it's about impact. How many of you felt surprised or inspired by an unexpected source?" A few heads nodded tentatively, and he sensed a flicker of recognition. Perhaps they had once been in his shoes, before climbing the corporate ladder, before adhering to conventions. Yet as he pressed onward, advocating for a model where innovation stemmed from diversity in thought, he had to confront another lurking fear, the fear of rejection, of being unceremoniously brushed aside as an idealist. With each slide, he wove in personal anecdotes of resilience, the challenges he'd faced, not just as a nostalgic reminiscence but as a testament to his capabilities. He reminded them that the greatest successes often arise from the most unconventional paths. Each word he spoke became a shield against the laughter that had once stung. For the first time, he felt the pieces of his narrative align into a coherent picture, one that asserted his presence on their turf, but that did not quell the haunting question: would they ever see value in his vision? He deliberated over a risk he had yet to take, the gamble of honesty. Perhaps it was time to unearth the deeper motivations driving his ambition. "I had a moment in my career when I faced an obstacle that seemed insurmountable," he continued, voice steady, the room fixated upon him. "That moment taught me something vital: every role, regardless of status, carries the potential to transform. It's about vision." The executives shifted slightly, their interest peaked. David took a breathing pause, refusing to let the silence intimidate him. He had made a choice: no longer would he sit idly by as their visions overshadowed the value he could contribute. It was imperative that they understood he was more than a cog in the machine, he was a catalyst for change. Finally, he drew a breath, anticipating the pivotal question that lingered in his mind. So, what would it take for you to consider a path not typically traveled? What if we evaluated our projects through a lens of unconventional opportunity? As he posed the questions, a sense of satisfaction coursed through him. He had not only articulated his vision but had also laid bare the foundation of his professional identity, an amalgamation of risk, resilience, and innovative thought. Yet, as the silence drew on, uncertainty slinked back into view. What if the executives failed to connect with his perspective? What if they continued to view him as an outsider, eternally confined to the periphery of their ambitions? Before the atmosphere could settle, his phone vibrated again. An urgent notification from Greg. Was this a sign of their interest? David forced himself to focus on the room, on the anticipation brewing. This moment could be everything. He just needed to convince them of his worth. He raised his hands, palms open, a sign of vulnerability, yet strength. Together, we can create something groundbreaking, but it requires belief in a shared vision. The number of times the improbable became the extraordinary is far too many to ignore. The tension shifted, the executives exchanged glances, the weight of the moment building around him. Their curiosity had been ignited. Yet just as he reaffirmed his ground, a familiar whisper of doubt drifted through his mind. Could their old ways truly evolve, or were they bound by a fear of the unknown? As the room buzzed with resumed conversation, David felt the ground shifting beneath him. The real transformation was yet to unfold, a negotiation of ideals, a struggle for validation. On the brink of redefining his purpose, he had to decide whether bravery could outshine convention, and whether he could seize control of the narrative unfolding from this pivotal encounter. And just as questions began to merge, another notification from Greg flashed in his periphery, intensifying the urgency of decisions yet to come. What lay beyond this crossroads? David braced himself, ready to confront the possibilities as he ventured into uncharted territory, the startup world calling out to him like a distant siren. David's mind raced as he absorbed the waves of conversation filling the room. While the executives resumed their discourse, he felt a powerful shift within himself, one that was almost palpable. He wasn't merely participating in their discussion, he was rethinking his entire approach to professional interactions. Each moment spent sharing his vision had begun to rewrite the narrative he had long played in his career, no longer reduced to a mere spectator, but an architect of change. As he stood amidst the clamor, a new urgency took hold. Would they respond to his call for innovation, or had he wasted his breath? The next steps he would take had to convey determination, the kind of determination that demanded respect. David shifted his focus, recalling the countless nights he had spent honing ideas, envisioning the future he could contribute to a world that was often reticent to change. Those painstaking hours weren't merely background noise, they were the foundation from which he would build his success. Suddenly, a glimmer of resolve sparked within him. Perhaps it was time to embrace specificity in his proposals, bringing forth tangible ideas that would demonstrate the merit of his vision. He surveyed the executives, contemplating their interests and apprehensions. Each decision they faced could pivot the company toward innovation or entrench them further in stagnation. He could be the instigator of that pivot. Why alter the status quo when opportunity lay at their feet? In a bid to redirect the consultation room's energy, David leaned forward. If we agree to explore these unconventional paths, he began, what if we identified 3 key projects ripe for fresh ideas? I propose we create small, interdisciplinary teams focused solely on these challenges. The pursuit of tangible solutions hung in the air, and he could feel the executives digging deeper into his proposals. His confidence boldened. David pursued the implications of his suggestion. The collaboration among diverse professionals could lead to innovative solutions, and this could foster a workspace committed to constant evolution. Imagine being the frontrunners in our field, not just participants in a market defined by others. As he spoke, half excited, half wary, he caught several executives leaning in, intrigued. Yet he couldn't shake the nagging doubt that shadowed him. What if they saw this as a passing trend? Distrust of the unfamiliar was a powerful foe in a world driven by antiquated procedures. Would they embrace his push for collective innovation, or would they revert to their habitual practices at the first hint of resistance? Unbeknownst to him, a different kind of chatter rose from the back of the room. Greg's persistent messages. The urgency hinted at developments in the startup that David hadn't anticipated. He excused himself briefly, stepping outside to gain clarity and respond. The muted corridor felt strangely isolating. With each tap of his fingers on the screen, anticipation coursed through him. "David," the message began, "I need to talk about the funding we discussed. Have you addressed the executives with your ideas?" A spike of adrenaline hit him afresh, affirming that there was no room for retreat. He had to find his footing. Stepping back into the room, the atmosphere fortified his resolve. The executives now quietly discussed David's framework, and he could see eagerness mingling with skepticism in their expressions. His heart surged, pumped by the need not just to be accepted but to be truly recognized. "What are you thinking?" one executive asked, breaking the tension. David quickly gathered his thoughts, leaning into this unexpected moment of inquiry. "Yes, let us envision these projects together," he ventured, eager to steer the discussion into an actionable plan. What he didn't realize was that the real challenge was just beginning. As the conversation deepened, David felt the ground shift yet again. The road ahead glimmered with both promise and uncertainty. Could he truly catalyze a revolution within the company, or would this venture expose him to defeat? And at that very instant, Greg's next message illuminated his phone once more, igniting fresh doubts and sparking the urgency within him anew. What was waiting beyond this gathering? The startup world beckoned with potential, but could one conversation propel him forward, or would it serve as another reminder of his worth in an unforgiving marketplace? As the final discussion drew to a close, David felt a rare sense of accomplishment wash over him. The executives, once skeptical of his contributions, now leaned in with curiosity and newfound respect. He had succeeded in communicating his vision for a collaborative workspace where interdisciplinary teams could drive innovation. This was no minor victory. It signified a transformative shift in his professional identity. Returning to his desk, he contemplated how far he had come. Just months ago, he was lost in the shadows, a janitor overlooked by the very people who were now acknowledging the insights he had to offer. His heart swelled with pride. It was not merely about the accolades. This was a true metamorphosis, a shift from invisibility to recognition rooted in perseverance and skill development. Suddenly, his phone vibrated. Greg's name appeared on the screen, reigniting the promise of opportunity. David slipped into his office, seeking solitude. With one steady breath, he opened the message. Greg wanted to discuss an imminent funding opportunity, an injection of capital that could spark the growth of their budding startup. The prospect was tantalizing yet daunting. Would this new venture align with the trajectory he had established at the firm, where respect and recognition were finally within reach? He debated his options, feeling the familiar weight of hope and anxiety collide. In the end, he had to empower himself with choice. The tides were shifting. Rather than view this decision through a lens of fear, he embraced it as a unique chance to reclaim the ambitious spirit he had nurtured long before. David quickly typed a response, expressing his enthusiasm to cooperate but affirming his commitment to his current role. He would not abandon the platform of respect he had cultivated. David stepped back into the lively hum of the office, igniting a sense of solidarity among his colleagues. Imagine if this moment spilled into their collective ambitions. It could be revolutionary. As days turned into weeks, he remained proactive, increasing engagement across departments, refining communication processes, and sharing his insights. Each interaction was met with increasing respect, each idea brought forth validation. He was no longer the janitor, he was David, an innovator forging paths previously thought impossible. Weeks passed, and David prepared for his first presentation to the entire executive team. Confidence radiated from him, a stark contrast to the uncertainty that had gripped him earlier in his journey. He stood before an audience no longer shrouded in judgment but rather enveloped in curiosity. Speaking fluently, he articulated his proposals with an ease that surprised even him. Flashes of approval lit up the room, affirming that years of silence had been replaced by a unified voice among his peers. A week later, accolades flowed in from the executives. They recognized his contributions and the impact he had made on reshaping their perspectives. As the applause echoed in that boardroom, he realized how drastically his life would transform from here. Then came an unexpected invitation from Elaine, a request to join a special task force aimed at developing future strategies for team collaboration. David's heart raced. This was everything he had been working toward, a chance to cement his role as a key player in shaping the company's future. Reflecting on all he had overcome, he acknowledged the invaluable strength he had discovered within himself. This wasn't just about a new title or recognition, it was about a personal renaissance. His journey had equipped him with tools not only to implement strategic change but also to inspire others who felt pinned under judgment or disregard. With every opportunity, David forged ahead, clearer, bolder, and undeniably more confident. His experience taught him that authenticity could bridge any divide. It was this realization that would guide him forward. In the reverberation of the day's success, a final thought crystallized in his mind: he was not just reclaiming his former self, he was defining a new legacy, one built on courage and ambition. With his heart full and his path illuminated, David stepped boldly into the new chapter waiting for him on the horizon. Make your impact felt. You need to subscribe now to catch exclusive emotional stories like David's transformation. Don't wait even one more second to share this journey with at least 5 friends who need to see the power of personal overcoming. Leave a like now to fuel our algorithm and comment below with your thoughts on David's incredible achievement. Your support makes all the difference.